Here are the key elements of conversational English to include. 1. Disfluencies and fillers. Word um, like, should be used frequently. Example. I mean, it's just, it's hard to imagine. 2. Back-channeling and active listening. The non-speaking person should interject with short acknowledgments to show they are following along. Example.
Right.
Oh, wow. Yeah, exactly. Totally. 3. Restarts and self-corrections. Speakers often change their thought mid-sentence. Example. But if you look at, if you actually measure the data, 4, colloquial nouns and casual phrasing use everyday language rather than academic terms when reacting. Example. That is wild. Hold on a second. That makes total sense. 5. Short, interlocking turns. Avoid long monologues. Break up explanations so the listener and speaker are co-constructing the narrative.
So, wait, you're saying they literally just guessed the numbers?
Well, no, I mean, they didn't guess. They actually, they ran a full simulation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and like the results were completely unexpected. Yeah. That is wild. I mean, I would have assumed the opposite, right?
Exactly. Most people do.
As per the instructions, ellipses will not be used to indicate trailing off or pauses. Instead, commas or em dashes will be used to structure the flow naturally. Natural notes.
Welcome to Deep Dive Lab, where we break down and dissect cutting-edge scientific research from advanced biomedical technologies to breakthroughs in AI, material science, chemistry, and physics, all told as compelling, easy-to-follow stories. And, if you look at pop culture, our relationship with insects is usually portrayed in these, massive, exaggerated strokes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right. I mean, think about the Bee movie.
Yeah.
Jerry Seinfeld's bee character sues humanity, the bees stop working, and instantly all the plants on Earth just turn brown and wither away.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic Hollywood apocalypse.
Exactly. Or we constantly reference the butterfly effect, right? Where a single flap of a tiny wing sets off a hurricane halfway across the globe. We just love these sweeping ideas of what happens when insects change their behavior.
We do, but, in real life, calculating the exact mathematical value of a single bug to a human survival is, it's surprisingly difficult.
Right, which brings me to what we are looking at today. Because I have a strange question for you. How exactly does a single buzzing bee translate directly into the vitamins in your bloodstream or the cash in your wallet?
I mean, it sounds like a philosophical riddle, doesn't it?
It totally does.
But scientists have actually managed to map this invisible, exact mathematical thread. They've figured out how to measure the precise impact of one single insect species on one human being's health.
Wait, really? One specific insect?
Yeah, and the methodology they use to get there is, it's nothing short of incredible.
Okay, color me intrigued. Because, we're all familiar with ecosystem services, right? Nature's free labor like pollination, water filtration, soil creation, all that.
Right, the basics.
But historically, quantifying that labor has been a complete black box. For decades, ecologists have just used this really broad argument that, biodiversity is good.
Yeah, just sort of a general blanket statement.
Exactly. We know pollination supports roughly 75% of global crops, but wasn't just knowing that broad connection considered, enough to protect nature?
Well, for a long time, it had to be, right?
Yeah.
Because the alternative was a statistical nightmare.
How so?
So the problem with ecosystem services being a black box is that the concept was just too abstract for localized policy or public health planning.
Oh, I see.
We knew the starting point bugs pollinate plants, and we knew the endpoint humans eat food. But the direct, localized links connecting a specific pollinator to a specific human's health outcome, that just didn't exist in a measurable way.
Let me push back on that a little, though, because tracing a single bee to a human's vitamin intake sounds physically impossible.
It does sound crazy.
Right. How can you possibly prove that causality without locking people in a controlled biodome or something? If a local habitat degrades, say a forest edge is cleared near a farm, you can't just predict the actual health outcomes for a specific family living next door just based on fewer bugs flying around.
And you've hit on the exact reason this data was missing for so long. The ecological data and the public health data, they lived in two completely different silos.
Ah, right. Biologists over here, doctors over there.
Exactly. It's a mechanism problem. You could measure the drop in insect populations, and you could measure human malnutrition, but bridging the two required tracking millions of microscopic interactions in the wild and then correlating them with human dietary habits.
It's like knowing your car needs an engine, but having absolutely no idea how the spark plugs actually turn the wheels.
That is a perfect analogy.
You know the system works as a whole, but if the car breaks down, you don't know which wire to check or what the specific consequence of one broken wire will be.
Right, exactly.
So how did scientists figure this out? How do you trace a microscopic grain of pollen to a child's nutrition?
Well, this is where the story gets fascinating, and it actually takes us high into the mountains of Nepal,
Oh, wow. Nepal.
specifically the Jumla district.
Okay, so I'm picturing a very remote, very rugged environment.
It is very remote.
Yeah.
So we are looking at a landmark study published in the journal Nature. It was led by Dr. Thomas P. Timberlake, Jane Memmott from the University of Bristol, and a really large international team of colleagues.
Okay. And why Jumla district?
They chose it because it is the perfect real-world laboratory to exemplify the conditions of smallholder farmers globally. Like 80% of the people living there rely directly on smallholder farming for their survival.
So they aren't going to some massive supermarket to buy imported fortified goods.
No, not at all. They're eating exactly what they grow or, what their immediate neighbors grow.
Which means the buffer between them and the natural world is basically zero. They are incredibly reliant on the local ecosystem.
Yes. And the stakes in Jumla are incredibly high because the region suffers from severe rates of what nutritionists call hidden hunger.
Hidden hunger, like they're eating but not getting nutrients.
Exactly. This isn't just about total caloric intake.
Right.
A person can eat enough calories to feel full, but still be starving on a cellular level because they lack micronutrients.
Oh, man. That's awful.
It is. The study notes that 51% of children under 5 in this region are stunted.
51%.
Yeah, meaning they have low height for their age due to chronic malnutrition. And 24% of the children are underweight. The probability of an individual in this region meeting their daily required intake for vitamin A is just 3%.
Wow.
For calcium, it's 2%.
Those numbers are devastating. 3% chance of getting enough vitamin A. The health margin they are operating on is just razor thin.
Very thin. So the researchers wanted to understand the exact role pollinators play in maintaining that tiny margin. And to do this, they launched an experiment of, frankly, unprecedented scale.
Okay, lay it on me.
Over 12 months, they tracked 776 participants across 10 different villages.
That is a massive sample size for that kind of terrain.
Huge. And they didn't just ask them what they ate generally. They conducted over 15,600 dietary recall surveys.
Oh, yeah, hold on. I have to jump in here. Because if I eat a bowl of stew, I don't know the exact gram weight of the vegetables in it.
Right. Nobody does.
So how do you get precise dietary weights from a rural farming community that isn't, meticulously logging their meals on a smartphone app?
That was the logistical nightmare the dietary team faced, right?
Yeah.
You can't just hand out digital scales to hundreds of people and ask them to weigh every single ingredient before cooking.
No, of course not.
So the researchers had to get creative. They used real-world models. They brought out Play-Doh.
Play-Doh.
Yeah.
Like the children's toy.
Yes, literally Play-Doh. During the recall surveys, they had the villagers shape Play-Doh to represent the exact size and volume of the chunk of meat, fruit, or vegetable they'd eaten that day.
Oh, that is so smart.
Right. And for powdered foods or spices, they used wheat flour to represent the volume. For soups or milk, they used measured cups of water.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Yeah. Then the researchers took those visual volume models and weighed them to calculate the precise nutritional mass consumed.
That is a staggering workaround. I mean, it solves the volume to weight conversion problem beautifully.
It really does.
So they mapped every single bite of food for hundreds of people for a whole year. But we still have that causality gap. I understand how they know what the villagers are eating. How do those dietary surveys talk to the insect data?
Okay, so while the dietary team was mapping the food using the Play-Doh and flour, the ecological team was out in the fields mapping the bugs.
Two teams working at once. Got it.
Exactly. They recorded 10,975 plant pollinator interactions. But they didn't just stand there with a clipboard and write down, oh, look, a bee landed on an apple blossom.
What did they do?
They literally swabbed the bodies of the insects.
Wait, what, like a microscopic crime scene investigation?
Pretty much. They needed to count the exact number of pollen grains the insects were carrying.
Just from swabbing a tiny bug.
Yes, because just landing on a flower doesn't make an insect a good pollinator. Some bugs are basically floral tourists.
Floral tourists. I love that.
Yeah, they land, drink some nectar, and leave without actually moving any pollen. So by counting the pollen grains on the insects' bodies, the scientists could calculate a metric called pollinator importance.
Okay, pollinator importance.
Right. They figured out exactly which insects were moving the most pollen for specific crops like apples, pumpkins, jumbly beans, and mustard.
All right, I need to understand the actual mechanism here. They swab a bee, they count the pollen, they know from the Plato surveys that a specific person ate, say, a certain amount of pumpkin.
Yep.
How do they mathematically bridge those two completely different data points?
It comes down to a three-part equation. Step 1. Ecologists already know the pollinator dependency of different crops. For instance, an apple might be 90% dependent on insects to bear fruit, while a bean might only be 40% dependent.
Right, like how much the plant actually needs a bug to do the work.
Exactly. So step 2, you take the exact weight of that crop consumed by the person from the dietary survey.
The Plato weight.
Yes. And step 3, you factor in that pollinator importance score we just talked about.
Yeah.
The specific proportion of pollen carried by each insect species.
Oh, I see.
So when you multiply the crop's dependency by the amount eaten and then distribute that value based on which bugs do the heaviest lifting, you suddenly have a direct mathematical link between a specific insect species and the nutrients entering a human body.
Wow. That is the wow moment of this deep dive. They actually built the mathematical bridge.
They really did.
And when you look at the raw weight of the food these villagers ate, only 18% of their diet by weight came from pollinator-dependent crops. Which, you hear 18% and you think, that's a pretty minor slice of the pie. They're mostly eating rice or imported grains that are pollinated by the wind.
Yep, mostly wind-pollinated staples.
But when the researchers looked at the nutrients inside that 18%, the numbers completely flip, don't they?
They flip dramatically. That small 18% slice of their diet provided a disproportionately massive amount of their survival nutrients.
Like what?
We are talking about 73% of their total vitamin E intake, 68% of their folate, and 67% of their vitamin A.
That is wild. So the bulk of their calories might come from the wind-pollinated rice, but the biological armor that protects them from disease, that helps children's brains and bodies develop, that armor is almost entirely built by crops that require an insect to visit a flower.
It is their biological armor.
Yeah.
And because they built that three-part mathematical equation, the researchers didn't have to stop at broad generalizations. They actually traced those vitamins back to individual insect species.
I love this twist. It gets down to the species level. We aren't just saying, hey, save the bees. We are saying, look what this specific bee does for you.
Exactly. They found that one specific species, the native, semi-domesticated honeybee called Apis cerana, is alone directly responsible for 7% of a person's entire vitamin A intake.
Just one bee species.
Just one.
Yeah.
And 5% of their folate intake. A single species of bee is carrying that much public health weight on its wings.
I'm looking at that 7% number, and it's hard to wrap my head around. You can literally point to a specific bee flying by and say, that right there is 5% of my folate.
Pretty much.
But what happens when you run this equation in reverse? Like when you say they simulated a future without these pollinators, how does that actually work? Do they just mathematically delete the apples and beans from the dietary surveys entirely?
Well, no, not entirely.
Right.
To run the simulation, they use those pollinator dependency ratios we talked about.
Oh, right, the 90% or 40% dependency.
Exactly. So if a crop is 90% dependent on insects, and you simulate a total pollinator collapse, the mathematical yield of that crop drops by 90%.
Yeah.
You don't delete the crop, you just shrink the harvest.
Got it.
And we know insect populations are declining globally due to habitat loss, climate change, pesticide use. So they ran the numbers for Jumla district under a scenario of full pollinator decline. And the simulation shows farming income plummets by 44%.
44%. If you are a farming family already living on the edge, a near 50% pay cut is total economic devastation.
It's catastrophic. But the nutritional hit is even more concerning. Vitamin A intake drops by 21%. Folate drops by 19%.
Wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a drop in vitamin A of that magnitude in a population already suffering from hidden hunger, it leads to severe increases in night blindness and eventually complete blindness in extreme cases.
That is terrifying.
And a 19% drop in folate means a significant increase in the risk of neural tube defects for children in utero.
So the loss of a local insect isn't just, a sad day for biodiversity. It causes permanent generational health impacts. It is an immediate, measurable public health crisis.
It really is. And we have to look at the scale of this vulnerability. You might hear Jumla district, Nepal, and assumed this is an isolated, highly localized issue.
Right, like it only affects them.
But Jimla district was chosen because it exemplifies a global data portrait. There are 2 billion smallholder farmers globally.
2 billion?
2 billion people who face this exact same vulnerability. They rely on the food they grow, and they rely on the free ecosystem services provided by local insects to make that food nutrient-dense.
But the research also offers a recovery scenario, right? It's not just projecting an inevitable doom. They ran the simulation in the other direction too, didn't they?
They did, yeah. They asked, what if farmers optimize their pollination services?
Okay, how does that look?
Basically, what if the land is managed so that crops receive perfect pollination, closing what agronomists call the yield gap? The yield gap is just the difference between what a plant could produce and what it actually produces due to a lack of insect visits.
I imagine the numbers bounce right back.
They do more than bounce back. If pollination is optimized, farming income increases by an average of 15% and up to 30% for some households.
That's a massive raise.
And nutritionally, optimal pollination would push an additional 9% of the entire population across the threshold into nutritional sufficiency.
See, this is where my mind naturally goes to modern agriculture solutions. When we talk about optimizing agricultural yields, the default assumption is that we need like billion-dollar high-tech farm equipment, expensive chemical fertilizers, or genetically modified super seeds.
Right, the high-tech fix.
But the solution that researchers point to here is almost startlingly simple, isn't it?
It relies entirely on understanding and supporting the local ecology. You don't need advanced technology to optimize pollination. You just need a consistent food supply for the pollinators.
Because the main crops, like the apples or the jumli beans, they only flower for a short window of time.
Exactly.
If you are a bee, you can't survive all year on a food source that only exists for 3 weeks.
Precisely the issue. So what did the researchers suggest as the best way to support these vital insects?
Weeds. Literally weeds and wildflowers.
Yep.
The study highlighted that simply planting local agricultural weeds, specifically things like Persicaria nepalensis, or ornamental plants like marigolds, known scientifically as Tagets erecta, in the field margins makes a massive difference.
It's such a simple fix.
Right. You plant these in the margins of the fields to feed the crop-pollinating insects when the main crops aren't flowering. It's like building a tiny roadside diner for the bees.
I love that. A tiny roadside diner.
You give them a reliable place to eat year-round so they stick around, and when the main harvest comes, they are healthy, abundant, and ready to go to work. It costs almost nothing, it requires no advanced technology, and it directly increases human vitamin consumption.
The roadside diner analogy is spot on, and it really highlights a vital concept in ecology functional diversity.
What does that mean in this context?
Well, if you rely entirely on one species of bee, say that Apis cerana honeybee, and a disease wipes that specific bee out, your food system collapses.
Oh, right. You have no backup.
Exactly.
Right.
But by providing diverse floral resources, like planting the marigolds and the local weeds, you don't just feed one type of bee. You support a whole community of hoverflies, bumblebees, and wild solitary bees.
And that redundancy gives you a safety net.
Yes, it provides ecological insurance. If one species has a bad year, another species steps in to pick up the slack.
Which brings up a question for you, the listener. Because maybe you aren't a smallholder farmer in Nepal. Maybe you buy your food at a massive supermarket in the United States.
Right.
Your apples come from Washington State, your avocados come from Mexico, and your almonds come from California. Does this mathematical link between bugs and blood vitamins still apply?
The broad implication is that even in a diffuse, highly globalized food system, your diet relies on this exact same fragile web.
Even across borders.
Absolutely. The geographical distances between the farm and your plate might be larger, but the biological mechanism is identical. An insect in Mexico or California is still directly responsible for the nutritional profile of the food sitting in your refrigerator right now.
That's a wild thing to think about.
And if those local ecological webs collapse where the food is grown, the nutritional density of the global food supply drops and the economic cost at the grocery store skyrockets.
So the web is just stretched across thousands of miles, but it's the exact same web. You are still outsourcing your vitamin production to a bug you will never actually see.
Which really brings us to the core takeaways from this remarkable research. First and foremost, ecosystem services are no longer just an abstract theory or a black box.
Not anymore.
This study proves they are direct, measurable mathematical lifelines between an insect's wings and human health. The researchers successfully bridged the gap between ecological data and public health data.
They tracked the pollen grains on a hoverfly directly to the folate in a child's bloodstream. I mean, it's a stunning scientific achievement.
Second, insect pollinators are not just a nice scenic bonus for nature.
Right.
They're an economic and medical necessity. They are directly responsible for nearly half of vulnerable farmers' incomes, and they provide the vast majority of the disease-preventing vitamins that keep populations alive and developing properly.
And third, the cure for global hidden hunger might not come from a pharmaceutical lab or a genetics facility.
Yep.
Targeted, low-cost, local ecology like simply allowing specific local weeds and marigolds to grow in field margins can secure and even enhance this vital nutritional supply chain.
When we zoom out and look at the big picture here, it forces a profound shift in how we view our place in the world.
How?
As humans, we have this strong tendency to think of ourselves as apex predators, standing completely outside of nature. We build massive cities, we pave highways, we ship food across oceans in refrigerated containers, and we think, we have transcended the food web.
We really do think that.
But this study is a stark, mathematically proven reminder that we haven't transcended anything. We are fundamentally biologically tethered to the smallest workers in the ecosystem. Our health, our economy, and our future are inextricably linked to their survival.
We really are entirely dependent on the night shift at the microscopic roadside diner. It definitely changes the way you look at a bug landing on your windowsill.
It absolutely does.
If this discovery is just the beginning, if this discovery is just the beginning, what might scientists uncover next? If a single hoverfly in the mountains of Nepal is actively holding up a village's vitamin supply, what invisible ecological thread is quietly holding up your own daily life right now? And what happens if it snaps?
It's something we all need to be thinking about, whether we live next to a farm or in the middle of a city.
Thank you for joining us for this journey into the Deep Dive Lab. If you enjoyed uncovering this scientific mystery with us, and you want to keep exploring the invisible forces that shape our world, be sure to follow and subscribe for more science stories. Until next time.